All right, so we're going to talk about the ratification of the Constitution. Um, and remember, the Constitutional Convention was from May to September 1787. And before the Constitution that we have now, which the Constitutional Convention, which was held in Philadelphia, created, there was the Articles of Confederation, and we talked a little bit about why the Articles of Confederation did not work. Now, like I've told you before, these lectures, if I don't explain something that well, I mean, there's a lot of things, there's a lot more to all of this. History is one of those things that you can spend literally an entire semester just on the Constitutional Convention. So, if there's things that you don't understand, you can write me an email and ask me, but more importantly, what I would rather you do is read your textbook. Read the textbook. Or read other articles on the internet, even though sometimes you can't always rely on everything that the internet says. Nonetheless, it's a supplement. The textbook is obviously more reliable, and you want to look over that, read that. But look at some other things, all right, on the internet. And there's also a library that you can find information in. Okay, so of course I'm being a little bit facetious there. But what I want you to understand is, don't depend just on the lectures if you want to get, a better understanding, okay? Now, 9 out of the 13 states had to ratify this new Constitution, okay? And not everybody was for this new Constitution. They had basically two groups of people. You had the Anti-Federalist and you had the Federalist. And really, the Anti-Federalists felt that the government was too powerful, and they were afraid that the government would become, too large, and that republics could not last if they were too large, and that there needed to be, and this is very important, there needed to be a Bill of Rights. Now remember, the Bill of Rights was the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And we're going to talk about that in the next lecture. And basically, one way of looking at the Bill of Rights is that it limits the power of the government and ensures individual rights over the power of the government, okay? And so there were people, like I said, that were anti-federalists that did not like the Constitution, but many of them were won over by a Bill of Rights, okay? The promise of a Bill of Rights. Now, the Federalists were for this new Constitution, okay? And what I want you to understand is that as they went through the ratification process, they did get the 9 out of 13 states that they needed. But one of the states that did not ratify was New York. And of course, New York was a big state and a very populous state. And Federalists like Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison wrote what was later collected into a volume called The Federalist, several essays Hamilton wrote 50. Let me write this. The Federalist. You can actually order this off of Amazon. It probably costs you about 55 cents. Of course, the shipping would cost about $3. So, and you could read it. Okay. Actually, I put an S right here. It's just the Federalist. It's not Federalists. But anyway, Hamilton, I think, wrote like 50 essays. Madison wrote around 30. I think Jay wrote around 5. I'm not exactly sure the number, something like that. And they were published in New York newspapers between October of 1787 and July of 1788. You don't have to remember that, not a biggie. The essays had only one purpose. All right? The essays had only one purpose: to secure ratification of the Constitution by New York. Okay? The most famous is Madison's Federalist number 10. In which he argued against the Anti-Federalists' argument that somehow a large republic is a sure way of that republic not surviving. What Madison said was that, in fact, it was the opposite, that a larger commercial republic, and when I say commercial here, what I mean is the idea that Jefferson had. Jefferson was more of an anti-federalist. He was won over by the Bill of Rights. At the time, he was the U.S. minister to France. He was living in France, in Paris, and Thomas Jefferson kind of imagined a country there's a lot of educated small businesses, people that own small businesses, small farms, that type of thing. Whereas people like Hamilton and Madison kind of viewed their image of America was kind of like what we see today. It was much larger, it was much more commercial, large business, that type of thing. Okay, because what he said was that in a modern commercial nation consisting of many different interests, majorities could only be shifting coalitions of interests incapable of prolonged tyranny. Now, let me throw that out to you in a different way. So basically what Madison was saying is that if you have this large nation with a lot of different interests, okay, in a situation like this, it's actually better because no one interest group, all right, will ever get total control. They would just kind of shift back and forth, okay? And so basically power would be dispersed, okay? Is this making, I hope this makes sense. I mean, this is what, when I wish we were in a face-to-face class, all right? So in other words, let's look at today. We have the government, but then you also have a lot of interest groups. You have corporations, for example, multinational corporations. And what people would argue is that you never want the government to become too powerful. At the same time, you don't want the government to just kind of wither away and allow corporations to take over everything. All right, you want to kind of disperse power as much as you can. If the government gets too power, you want to kind of, rein that in. But you also don't want commercial interests and corporations to take over either. Okay, you want to kind of have all these different interests, different institutions, all right, and maybe they fight over, power, that type of thing, but you kind of want to disperse power and so that no one institution has so much power that they start controlling the lives of us. All right? And some people today think that the government's too powerful. Other people think that the private sector, like corporations, are too powerful, and that you need the government to kind of balance that out. So those are a lot of the arguments that you find in politics today. You can kind of boil it down to that very thing. I mean, it goes all the way back to some of the arguments that were made between the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists. Like, really, what is the function of government, for example? Okay, how powerful should government be? All right, what is the relationship between the government and the rights of individuals? How do we ensure, all right, that we do not fall into some type of tyranny, either by the government, but not necessarily even by the government? Like I said, maybe the private sector may have, in a way, methods of infringing on our individual rights. Okay, so, this is things that you have to think about. All right, and you have to come to some of your own conclusions about that. And as a citizen of a nation, those are the things I think that you probably should think about. Anyway, I don't want to preach to you. Anyway, the Federalists were very effective, and New York did ratify, and later on other states like Rhode Island, North Carolina ratified. So it ended up getting a unanimous ratification. Benjamin Franklin observed, "Our Constitution is an actual operation, and everything appears to promise that it will last. But in this world, nothing is certain but death and taxes." But anyway, that's what Benjamin Franklin said. Okay, so that is the ratification of the Constitution, and the next lecture will be, I'll do a short lecture on the Bill of Rights.